Good morning. Today, we are going to be talking about how to prepare your employment-based variance application. There are several types of variances that exist within the state of Alaska. For the purpose of this training, we will be discussing how to prepare your employment-based variance application if you are an applicant who has received a notice of barring conditions from the State of Alaska Background Check Program. Agenda. In this presentation, we will be covering the following topics under employment-based variances. Introduction. We will discuss the foundation for the variance program at the Alaska Native Justice Center. Program and history. We will cover a brief overview of the background check program's history and how the program developed into what it is today. We will discuss the purpose of background checks and why it's important. We will discuss the governing statutes and regulations that apply to variances. We will identify who do variances apply to. We will examine barrier crime matrices and crimes. These are crimes identified by the state of Alaska as crimes for which a convicted individual would need to seek a variance for employment. We will cover how to prepare your variance application. Once your variance application has been submitted, what does adjudication look like? Lastly, we will review examples of variance conditions if they apply. Program. Here at the Alaska Native Justice Center, our variance program falls under Elder and Variance Services. It's a 638 subgrant provided as long as our current grant funding sources continue. To be eligible for variance services at ANJC, participants must be American Indian or Alaska Native and have received a notice of barring conditions from a provider under DHSS. Later in the training, we will discuss what a notice of barring conditions is. Program history. Prior to a centralized background check program, Alaska had 12 different statutes and 19 different separate sets of regulations that govern background checks over the Alaska Department of Health, Division of Healthcare Services. Hereafter, we'll refer to them as DHSS providers. In 2005, Alaska began participating in the National Background Check Pilot Program, overseen initially by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. These background check standards first applied to skilled nursing facilities. After the pilot program, Alaska decided to apply these standards to all DHSS providers. Alaska received additional grant funding and built the legacy background check system. Alaska consolidated all DHSS background check statutes and regulations into one statute, 47.05, and one regulation, 7 Administrative Code 10.900. The program was running by 2007. In 2010, Alaska was awarded a grant to update the legacy system. And in 2013, the new Alaska Background Check System, NABCS, was adopted, and this is the program that exists today. Updates to the NABCS continue, including making more records accessible electronically. Purpose. The purpose of the variance program is to establish standards and procedures for barrier crimes and conditions, criminal history checks, and ensure compliance with the centralized registry. The background check program identifies certain criminal and civil offenses and conditions that would bar an individual from licensure, certification, or approval from DHSS. Lastly, the most important purpose of the program and compliance is to ensure that the health, safety, and welfare of vulnerable populations will be protected. Here we have a quote from Maggie Fairbanks. When trying to illustrate why the background check program and variances are important, I like to begin with this quote from one of my participants who was approved for an employment-based variance. Maggie said, "Probably 98% of people with a criminal history come out of jail feeling like they won't qualify for most things in life, such as a good job, housing, and resources, even though these things are available. I'd like to share my experience as a testament to other applicants that these barriers can be overcome. By being approved for a variance, I became qualified to be able to work as a peer support specialist and help others who had similar journeys to mine. I never thought that these could be possible until I received help from ANJC. Maggie's story is important when I explain the program's purpose. When I started working with Maggie, she fully disclosed her past and criminal record with me, but was also able to demonstrate all of the wonderful work she had done to maintain her sobriety, wellness, and how she had completely turned her life around for the better. Maggie's path forward and the effort she put in is not for the faint of heart and was quite remarkable. The more I worked with Maggie, the more she helped me understand the importance of the program and that there needs to be a mechanism for individuals to improve their lives, despite any past criminal history, if they can show that they've been rehabilitated and who are willing to put in the work and become the healthy part of our community. At one point, Maggie told me that there's no better person to get you through your recovery program than someone who has done it. And that was exactly the work that Maggie was hoping to do under the Variance program. Statutes and regulations. Currently, there is one statute and one regulation that govern the program. They are as follows. Alaska Statute 47.05. This is the statute that provides the authority. This authority falls under the administration of welfare, social services, and institutions. Alaska Administrative Code 10.900. This is the regulation that identifies barrier crimes, processes, and fees. Who does this apply to? Variances apply to individuals or entities. Entities can also mean a provider or employer required by statute or regulation to be licensed or certified by DHSS. Examples of entities that fall under this program here in Alaska, for example, are hospitals, such as Providence, treatment centers, such as South Central Foundation, or other providers that serve vulnerable populations, such as the Arc of Anchorage, Genesis Recovery, or a senior home, as a few examples. Vulnerable populations can include children, seniors, adults, immigrants, people with disabilities, or people seeking medical or other care. A variance can also apply to individuals or entities eligible to receive payments from DHSS for the health, safety, and welfare of persons served by programs administered by DHSS. Barrier crime matrices. A barrier crime matrix is the table that outlines specific criminal or civil offenses that can prevent or restrict an individual from certain types of employment or participation in specific programs, especially those involving vulnerable populations like children or the elderly. These matrices are based on state and federal regulations related to background checks and licensing requirements. In Alaska, each barrier crime is tagged with the following time restrictions. Permanent barriers. This means that a barrier crime or condition will remain on an individual's background check permanently. In Alaska, there are no expungements of convictions. 10-year barriers. This means that a barrier crime or condition will remain on an individual's background check for 10 years from the date of disposition or the conviction date. 5-year barriers. This means that a barrier crime or condition will remain on an individual's background check for 5 years from the date of disposition or the conviction date. And finally, we have 3-year barriers. This means that a barrier crime or condition will remain on an individual's background check for 3 years from the date of disposition or the conviction date. Barrier crime matrices continued. This slide is a demonstration of how barrier crime matrices operate. This is a screenshot taken from a Notice of Barring Conditions, which is the notice that the state of Alaska sends out once a background check has been completed for an individual who applied for employment with a covered entity or an employer who is subject to this program. In the first bullet, this individual received a substantiation by OCS in 2022. Note, this is a civil and not a criminal barrier. This is listed as a 10-year barrier. The date of the substantiation was November 29, 2022. This barrier will be on the individual's record for 10 years until November 29, 2032. In the fourth bullet, this individual was charged with assault in the fourth degree. Note, this is a criminal barrier. This is listed as a 5-year barrier. We know that this is currently an active criminal case before the court because it says that there is a missing disposition and will remain a barrier until a final disposition is received. Once there is a disposition attached, this barrier will remain on an individual's record for 5 years from the date of disposition or conviction. Barrier crimes under Administrative Code 10.905. There is a long list of barrier crimes and civil conditions that fall under the Administrative Code for the program. Generally, those crimes fall into the following categories: attempt, solicitation, and conspiracy, offenses against the person. This is the most common category I see. Offenses against property, offenses against the family and vulnerable adults. This is the other more common example I see. Examples under this category can include substantiations by OCS or any findings of child neglect. Offenses against public administration, offenses against public order, offenses against public health and decency. The most common category I see is controlled substances. This can include any conviction related to substances such as heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, for example. Imitation controlled substances. This can include imitation bath salts, anything sent in a mail order that carries a criminal conviction. And then lastly, other crimes and conditions. The requirement of owed restitution or certain conditions such as not being allowed to drive or work with children. That will be specified in the Notice of Barring Conditions. Barrier conditions. Barrier conditions is a broad term encompassing factors that restrict or prevent a specific activity, process, or access. These are additional conditions that might be applied per barrier, such as restitution is still owed. I see this applied where an individual has a large amount of restitution owed, usually for more stringent federal crimes. The requirement not to work with certain populations, such as children. And finally, as I mentioned, more stringent federal prohibitions. This includes any crime at the federal level, which may include longer periods of time where barriers remain that might be widened beyond the state scope. Background check process. This process is all started by a state background check being performed. The background check application that the state performs will include the following. Fingerprints will be taken. The employer or entity submits an online application on the My Alaska website to start the background check, and a fee is paid to start this process. Notice of Barring Conditions. A notice of barring conditions is the formal communication sent by the state of Alaska to prevent an individual from accessing or performing certain actions within a defined location, organization, or for a specific duration as a result of their criminal or civil barriers, and any past criminal history that the state would say poses a safety risk to vulnerable populations. This is the notice that the state issues as a result of the background check if the individual has history. For the Alaska Notice of Barring Conditions, it will always look similar to this example. Here, it's on state letterhead and sent by certified mail to the individual. It will come from the background check program, and it will list the employer or provider that requested the background check. It's a denial to continued employment with the provider based on an individual's barriers, but it's also a green light to be able to apply for a variance and seek an exception to the bar if the individual no longer poses a risk and can show that they have been rehabilitated. Timeline. This infographic provides an overview of the application and adjudication timeline, and the next slide discusses each part of the application in detail. Timeline continued. The application process itself can take up to 120 days, and that's broken down as follows. The Oversight Division has 30 days to review your application to determine if it is complete. That does not mean approval or denial. It means, has the division determined that enough documents and information have been provided for the committee to make a decision? The division can also request more documentation during this review. If your application is found to be incomplete, the Oversight Division will contact you for additional information. If your application is found to be complete, the division will send their recommendation to the Variance Committee. This next level of review may take up to an additional 30 days. After this first level of review, the Variance Committee will send their combined recommendation to the Department of Health, Department of Family and Community Services Commissioner's Office. The Commissioner's Office has 30 days to make their decision. Please note, you will not be notified when your application is sent to each level of review, but I encourage you to follow up on the status. What does a variance application require? Variance applications require the following: a completed variance application form, your rationale for granting the variance. This can be in the form of a declaration, affidavit, and letters of recommendation, a summary of any mitigating circumstances regarding the barriers. That can also be addressed in your declaration or affidavit, a demonstration of how the health, safety, and welfare of recipients of services will be adequately protected. Evidence of the individual's present fitness that can also be included in your letters of recommendation, certificates of completion for treatment or other rehabilitation programs, the age of the individual at the time of the offense, problem, or circumstance, and the amount of time that has elapsed since the most recent offense. Records. You must include records related to the bearer crime or condition, any protective orders that have been issued or filed, conviction or judgment records, indictment or charging documents, records regarding if the applicant has been charged with a crime without a subsequent conviction, records regarding if the applicant has been charged with a crime that was reduced to a lesser charge, such as a plea deal, records regarding if the applicant has been charged with a crime for which a suspended imposition of sentence was granted by the court. Records continued. You must also include any incarceration records, a copy of orders from local, state, or federal jurisdictions that release the individual from incarceration, any terms and conditions of parole, the extent, nature, and seriousness of the following: the individual's offense and past criminal record, a behavioral health problem if it exists, and a domestic violence problem if it exists. Letters of recommendation. You must include at least 2 letters of recommendation from credible persons. The individuals must be aware of the applicant's background history, behavioral health problem, DV problem, and who would, despite that knowledge, recommend that a variance be granted. Letters must be from persons who are unrelated to the individual for whom the variance is requested and who are not associated with a provider who submitted the request for a variance. Information about the position of employment. You must include all information related to the job responsibilities that would be performed. This can include the hours and days of service, whether the individual would be in contact with recipients of services, the plans for supervision, including whether the individual would be subject to direct supervision while on the premises during hours of operation, a resume with lists of duties and skills and employment references, your GED, diploma, or copies of any degrees as they apply, and finally, certifications and any licenses. Documentation to demonstrate avoiding risk of being a repeat offender. You must include evidence of risk reduction, education, training, a statement from the individual requesting a variance that describes all actions that the individual has taken to reduce their risk of reoffending, to include proof of active participation or completion of any treatment programs required by the court, any evidence of rehabilitation, prevention, or treatment efforts, and finally, evidence that the individual is licensed under AS-08 or became licensed after the individual was convicted of the offense or after the department under 7 AAC 10.915 determined a barrier condition to exist. Record organization. ANJC has a number of established templates for preparing variance applications. This is an example of our variance application cover letter. As shown in this example, your cover letter should identify your enclosed supporting documents, forms, and whatever documentation has been included for your application. At ANJC, we provide that documentation as exhibits, and each exhibit has a title page and is organized into specific categories of the documentation. For example, we identify the professional records, information about the employment sought, as well as court records and documentation to establish that this applicant has been rehabilitated and is at low risk of being a repeat offender. The cover letter should also include the applicant's background check number, and this is also required on the application form that is displayed in the next slide. The variance application form. The variance application also includes this application form. This is the first page of 8 pages, and the application form is quite detailed. The application form will ask specific questions about the employment being sought and the applicant's history and contact information. Personal statement. The personal statement is required per question 7 on the form, as shown above. Here at ANJC, we address that requirement by helping the applicant draft a declaration to address all of the information requested in the form. Question 7 asks that the applicant attach a detailed statement of any and all mitigating circumstances that were involved at the time of the offense. This should include information regarding what happened prior to, during, and after the barrier crime or condition. Personal statement continued. This slide is an example of the template ANJC uses to assist applicants with drafting their personal statement. It does not need to be in this format, but it should address question 7 in full. This slide is a redacted sample personal statement from one of our applicants who was approved. You can see from this sample that the applicant did a wonderful job of detailing her life story to include her childhood, where her parents struggled with addiction, and how some of those factors impacted her adulthood and what led to her subject barrier crimes and conditions. She also goes into great detail about the work she has done to rehabilitate herself, and she describes what she hopes to accomplish in the future as a peer support specialist. Submission of your application and adjudication. This slide is the example email that is issued by the State Background Check Program when a variance application has been submitted. The email will contain the application number for tracking purposes. This is the BCV number. The confirmation email will also give a brief overview of the adjudication timeline. Adjudication. If the variance application is approved, this is what the approval notice will look like. The approval notice will indicate if there are any conditions set on the approval and who the associated provider or employer is. The bottom highlighted portion of the notice has an important reminder that the applicant must be hired by the employer facility indicated on the decision within 100 days or transfer the variance decision to a new employer facility within that 100 days. Quote from Laura Sedek. This is another quote shared by one of our clients who was approved for variance, shared with her permission. Laura said that ANJC's time and commitment to help her get the application done gave her hope. Today, she works at the Arc of Anchorage as a peer support specialist. She works on the residential side. She has an amazing team, a set schedule, 401k, paid time off, things she was only dreaming about before. Laura said that this program could be advertised more, as she knew firsthand that there are more people with the same background and story. She believed in change and was very passionate about helping people who, like her, wanted change. Laura said that ANJC held no judgment and believed in her when she wasn't able to. 800 pages of her past was hard to get through, but it wasn't impossible without ANJC's help. ANJC service areas. That covers our training on how to prepare your employment-based variance application. ANJC also offers additional services in the following areas. ANJC has services for people, tribes, education, and outreach. Tribal justice. Specifically, ANJC provides assistance in the following service areas: training and technical assistance to tribes and tribal justice systems. ANJC provides resources and facilitation, representing Alaska tribes in child welfare cases. ANJC participates in the Alaska Intertribal Technical Assistance Working Group. And finally, ANJC provides assistance with tribal criminal jurisdiction. Survivor services. ANJC provides integrated and legal services with case management. And finally, ANJC also provides culturally aware services for survivors and victims of crime, to include crimes involving domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. Thank you for participating in this training on how to prepare an employment-based variance application. If you have any questions about ANJC services or wish to find more resources on employment-based variance applications, please visit ANJC's website, where you will find links to various services at anjc.org.